This video is about the Mexican conquest of Aztlan, the American Southwest. Use the information in this documentary to demand that our laws be enforced. Do not attack anyone because of their race, language, or national origin. Americans of Mexican descent are some of our finest citizens and are hurt more by illegal immigration than any other group. On August 15, 2001, WorldNet Daily ran a lead story about a prize-winning Mexican author, Elena Poniatowska, who said that her country is recovering territory from the United States with a massive army of uncontrolled immigration. According to Poniatowska, quote, Mexico is recovering the territories yielded to the United States by means of migratory tactics, unquote. This journalist, who has taught at Harvard, Princeton, and Yale, is absolutely right.
By some estimates, there are 15 million illegal aliens in the United States, perhaps 3 to 5 million of them from Mexico.
Millions of Mexicans came to the United States illegally while Dr. Robert Bach was in charge of INS enforcement policy. Before taking on the job of protecting America, Bach had spent 7 years working for the Ford Foundation, the backers of the Mexican-American Legal Defense and Education Fund, and the National Council of La Raza.
I think it's clear that Osama bin Laden is the Ford Foundation for Islamic extremists. He's the money bags. He makes it possible.
What we've discovered is that I think it was on August the 21st, so that's only 3 weeks before the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, the CIA passed information to the Immigration Service of the United States, asking them to put out a lookout for a guy named Al-Madari, who's one of the, turned out to be one of the hijackers on the plane that hit the Pentagon. The Immigration Service put that name into their computer and discovered that this guy was already in the country.
Well, what's the new strategy? It's a bright, flashing sign that says to potential illegal aliens, come to the United States. Once you make it past the Border Patrol, you are home free.
And we're going to get into this again tomorrow. I want the audience to know on the factor. Vicente Fox coming up here saying, hey, we want open borders. We want to have everybody come in here from Mexico who wants to come in. And you don't think it's just going to be Mexicans coming in. Anybody who wants to come in is just going to go to Mexico and drive right in. And you're going to legalize 4 million undocumented aliens. And in Canada, you know, anybody can come down there.
We must and we can reach an agreement on migration before the end of this very year.
In the June 21st issue of Time magazine, the lead story of which is entitled Amexica, it describes the de facto elimination of the border between Mexico and the United States. I believe that the debate revolving around our immigration policy should reflect the fact that this phenomenon is underway. President Fox yesterday stated that he came to the United States to, quote, play a more active role in establishing the new international architecture, unquote. I believe that this new international architecture can be described as Amexico.
I don't expect Mexico to allow millions of Americans to cross, buy the land and steal it.
Mexico.
I know, you say that. You have to enforce that with arms.
You took it away from us. Too many whites came.
Mexico.
We couldn't stop you. Too many blue eyes came.
Debbie is in her car. Debbie, you're on KBC with Larry.
Now, it's been a number of years since I was in Guadalajara, Mexico. While I was down there, I studied at one of the universities, sociology professor from the central part of Mexico, and they, in fact, are educating those that are in the outlying villages and towns. They have comic books, and they indeed are infiltrating with ideas to come back and take back the entire southwestern part of the United States. There is a really strong movement, and people down there do know about it, where they're trying to get the lower classes in Mexico that they're trying to, get all riled up.
All right, Debbie, thank you so much for the call.
Whether we have to wait 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, or even a month, we will make it over to the other side. It's our obligation to come here and fight to cross the border. There's a lot of us who get deported, even 2 or 3 times. But it doesn't matter. We're still going to cross over to the other side.
Dear Larry, I spent 10 years as a cruise hostess working at sea on cruise ships all over the world, so many of my assignments were to the Mexican Riviera. Going back to a destination over and over, we had working friendships with many of the local people working alongside of us in the Mexican tourist industry. Larry, the one phrase I heard 100 times or more was, when the revolution is over. When I asked for an explanation, it was always the same answer, when they have California back. Young or old, it seems they grew up being taught there would be a revolution someday. Somehow they would have California back. Tour guides, taxi drivers, waiters, bartenders, hotel managers, port agents. It didn't seem to matter who. They talked quietly but openly to us about it.
And let me also salute the Mexican migrants living in this country.
Great. This is the United States of America. This isn't Mexico.
It's all going to be down in brown, and all you guys can
all down in brown, huh?
You two at home can suck my.
It is time to organize. It's a time of war, and it's time to revolt, and it's your time to show we are a people of a struggle hasta San Diego.
Thanks for staying with us. I'm Newt Gingrich in for Bill O'Reilly. And in the Unresolved Problems segment tonight, illegals crossing the border. Last month, 14 illegal immigrants from Mexico died of thirst and exposure crossing the southern Arizona desert. The Mexican government is trying to prevent any more tragedies by giving immigrants border survival kits that contain food, water, and medicine. But will that just encourage more illegal immigration? Joining us from Anaheim, California, is Carlos Olamende, who is Vice President of the National Coalition of Professional Mexicans Abroad. And from Los Angeles, Glenn Spencer, who is President of AmericanPatrol.com. Let me start, if I could, Glenn, with you because of the background from your standpoint. Could you outline what you see as happening and what you think the American people should be concerned about?
Well, Newt, as an historian, I'm sure you understand the importance of historic perspective. On April 4th, 1997, responding to our new immigration law that you passed, the President of Mexico said as follows: "We will not tolerate foreign forces dictating and enacting laws on Mexicans." That was on April 4th. On April 3rd, the LA Times reported that a debate on our immigration laws in the Mexican Congress bordered on a declaration of war on the United States. And only 3 months later, the President of Mexico went in before a group in Chicago and said, quote, "I have proudly affirmed that the Mexican nation extends beyond the territory enclosed by its borders and that Mexican migrants are a very important part of it."
I have proudly affirmed that the Mexican nation extends beyond the territory enclosed by its borders and that Mexican migrants are a very important part of it.
And he announced a new dual citizenship law.
For that reason, my government proposed a constitutional amendment to allow any Mexican with the right and the desire to acquire another nationality to do so without being forced to first give up his or her Mexican nationality. ¡Viva la raza! ¡Viva México!
A law which I described in the December 24th, 1996 issue of the Los Angeles Times as a declaration of war on the United States. And I really believe it is. I said that almost 5 years ago. And I believe
how does that relate then, Glenn, to 14 innocent people dying in the desert?
Because the Mexican government is encouraging them to come. The Mexican government is trying everything in its power to encourage its people to come. Their borders are appointed by Fox. Mr. Rufo recently said, if the Border Patrol stops you, try again. So they are responsible for these deaths on the border, and that's why they're handing these kits out, because they're responsible for it.
Yeah, Mr. Olamende, I suspect you have a very different view of this. How would you interpret it?
Yes, well, first of all, it sounds to me that it's very responsible to say those words on the national television. And the attitude and the level of the negativism in the Mr. Spencer words, it's the one who encouraged more illegal activities. And what we're facing here is a reality. Right now, the problem with Mexico and United States, we cannot turn around. Right now we had to face it, and right now the Mexican government is not providing any illegal activity or try to bring more people into the United States.
Let me ask you a question, if I could, Mr. Olamundi. I noticed in today's newspapers that the Fox administration in Mexico has just announced that they're going to tighten up control of their own southern border, that they have a great deal of illegal immigration coming in from Guatemala, from Honduras, even from places like China, who are coming north through Central America and then crossing Mexico. Don't you find it a little interesting that the Mexican government, on the one hand, is actually getting tougher on its own southern border and doing more to control immigration into Mexico?
Well, sir, look at what we're facing right now here is we cannot continue looking at the problem of immigration just by one side or one government. This has had to be a completely bilateral decision of United States government, Mexican government, and Central American governments. And what we're doing right now,
we're a sovereign nation. We can make unilateral decisions about our borders, and we'd better.
Well,
we better do it right now.
That's exactly what you and your activity in your group and Chris also legal activity. You're talking that Mr. Fox is trying to promote immigration. No, sir. The immigration has been.
You are a member of the fifth column. Fifth column of subversives trying to break down the laws of the United States.
No, sir. People like you in the history.
You're advancing La Reconquista, the takeover, starting with California.
No, sir. Please. I think that you're looking very ignorant and from the
I'm not
TV.
Ignorant. I'm very knowledgeable.
Wait, let me break in.
Let me get this to the point, Mr. Greenwich, because this is an important issue. Right now, number one, this is not regarding the issue of the survival kit package. This is a well-established program, a national program of the federal government, try to help the health of the immigrant people, their communities, because right now we are facing now our problems
into the United States. They have set up a whole program. They've been doing it for years. They even call it themselves La Reconquista. They are taking back what they feel was lost as the result of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And you, Mr. Olamundi, are part of that program.
But Mr. Spencer, I'm curious.
I can contribute with my example, I feel like I had something to do because I am Mexican and I also American, and feel proud to be in that form.
Let me break in for a second, if I could.
Go ahead.
Because I'm fascinated by one of the things I've noticed in the last few years. There's a dramatic difference between the way some Californians view this issue and the way Texans seem to view it. Texans seem to have a much more accepting attitude towards the relationship between Mexico and the United States, a much more accepting attitude towards integrating the two cultures, and yet in California there's a much deeper resistance to that. Do you have any sense of what you ascribe that dramatic difference to?
I think
because
California
they don't understand the history.
He asked me the question, like and if I could please answer the question.
Please, if you would, Mr. Olamundi, let Mr. Spencer answer for a second. Go ahead.
I think that the record clearly shows that California has been targeted. We have the founder of the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund once said on Los Angeles radio, California is going to be a Hispanic state, and anyone who doesn't like it should leave.
We're going to take over all the political institutions of California. In 5 years, the Hispanics are going to be the majority population of the state.
You also made the statement that California is going to become a Hispanic state, and that if anyone doesn't like it, they should leave. Did you say that?
I did. They ought to go back to Europe.
Art Torres, head of the California Democratic Party, said Proposition 187, the proposition passed by 60% of California voters, was the last gasp of white America in California.
Remember, 187 is the last gasp of white America in California.
We have been targeted, and we know what is going on.
Well, I find it fascinating, Mr. Olamundi, briefly, you might comment from your perspective as an American of Mexican descent.
Clear. For the first time, we have two presidents facing the issues that historically any society, any country need to face. We are neighbors, and we have to continue to be as neighbors, and better we start right now facing those issues. Health issues are a problem. Right now, the smuggling is a problem.
Thank you very much.
Like Mr. Spencer.
Carlos Olamundi, a Mexican citizen, a Mexican lawyer, but he is also a U.S. citizen. He can vote in both countries. I said that dual citizenship was an act of war by Mexico. Why? How could that be? The evidence is irrefutable. Mexico passed dual citizenship because they saw California's Proposition 187 as a direct threat to their plan of conquest of California. They wanted millions of Mexicans to become U.S. citizens to, quote, vote in the interests of Mexico. But dual citizenship wouldn't stop Proposition 187. It was passed by 60% of California voters. To take care of this problem, they reached into the government of California and made a deal with Governor Gray Davis and Assembly Speaker Antonio Villaraigosa to kill it before it could reach the U.S. Supreme Court. Gray Davis and Antonio Villaraigosa were more than willing to betray the people of California.
Mexicana. Por su parte, el gobernador Gray Davis dijo,
the near future, people will look at California and Mexico as one magnificent region.
Espero.
For the first time, a Mexican citizen living abroad will serve in his country.